morning.
Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday.
Yeah, Friday.
Yeah, so we have changed locations just for probably an episode or two.
Who knows?
Who
well,
knows?
You never know.
We may even change it up again after this.
It's getting warm outside. We're going to have to be out on the porch.
Yeah, the only reason we're here today is because we needed extra help.
Yes.
So we are just changing locations depending on, whatever's going on.
What our
for the
needs
day.
are.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
We can do it or not.
Yeah, welcome to the table. We are at my house today.
Yes, it's wonderful.
Yeah, so this is going to be episode 6, and we are going to talk about boundaries. I'm not used to this mic stand, so hope I'm close enough.
Yeah,
We're going.
I wouldn't be able to use it. It's too tall.
You gotta pick up your mic so they can hear you.
It's too tall for
Okay.
me. I wouldn't be able to use that.
Yeah, lots of changes. We gotta keep up with all these changes every week, and it's a little whirling. But okay, so we're gonna talk about boundaries.
The
today.
Lord knows I don't like change. That's the problem.
Oh yeah, so He's
That's
like,
what
let's
it is.
just
Yes.
change your way.
Throw it her way
every
because
week.
she's gonna. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it just makes for a good time.
Am I handling it well?
Yes, you are.
I don't
You're
know
just
if I am or
making
not.
it seem natural.
Hi.
Okay, so with boundaries, we actually, the last time we sat and we're trying to figure out like what we were going to talk about next, we talked a lot about the book that I've mentioned a few times, The Forgiving What You Can't Forget.
Yep.
And we've been on this series of forgiveness, and I mean, I feel like we're in a really good place, but we just kind of wanted to keep going, kind of like a book study.
Yeah.
And we talked about finishing off this book with different topics, just to kind of, I know our last episode, I feel like we talked about a bunch, but then whenever I'm going through all of our topics we're going to be talking about, it was almost kind of like an overview. Like,
right.
we kind of touched on it all, and now we're really going to focus on each individual topic.
Yep.
So I really like the boundaries because
Yes.
you and I have been talking about that a lot, and how do you set good boundaries without coming off as mean or things like that, which we'll talk about today.
Yeah.
We're really
Yeah.
going to get into that.
It's hard. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess just diving in to boundaries, I was going to start with an analogy from this amazing book. I was telling Melissa I wish I could sit and just read the whole book, but chapter 9 is really, really good. So I'm not going to do that today. I'm going to save your time, but I really do recommend getting this book if you can. And this is not a sponsored video at all, but I know you can get it at places like Hobby Lobby, Amazon.
Yeah, Amazon.
Yeah, so it's a pretty accessible book.
Yeah.
But what I was going to start with chapter 9 is the author of this book was talking about, I feel like I'm out of breath. Okay, so she's talking about a rain analogy, which I thought was really cool and put some things into perspective for me. So to kind of shorten the analogy, she pretty much just said, imagine she's driving home and it's pouring down rain outside, and it ultimately doesn't matter if she gets out and she's stomping and yelling and screaming towards the sky, is like, get this rain to stop. Like, it really ultimately does not matter what she would have said. The rain's not going to stop. Like, she is not in control of that.
Right.
And so the whole chapter, she kind of talks about boundaries, and it ultimately, some of the things in other people's lives or with forgiveness, like, you cannot control, and it's just like the rain. Like, it really doesn't matter what you say. You get out and do some rain dances or whatever it is, but it's not going to stop on your account.
Right.
So that's kind of where we're going to be gearing a lot of our conversation towards today is, we set boundaries for certain reasons, and part of it is because of that control piece.
Yes.
So I'm gonna let you talk a little bit, whatever you want to say about boundaries.
Boundary, and I'm still working on the boundaries thing. I'm a lot better today than I once was. I'll tell you that. I find that because I like to help people, and I want people to feel good. I want everybody to be happy and content and all the things. I made my life just a revolving door. Just come on in whenever you want, Oh gosh, I got a text message. I got to answer it right now. I don't care that I'm doing 15 other things. Right. Somebody needs me. So the boundaries for me are still a work in progress, and probably always will be, you know, I mean, because it's a fine line on, or you think it is, I guess. Having the boundary, but being open. Like, how do you do that? That's, you know, it's, it's hard. But I think it's important to remember that the boundaries are not to be mean for somebody else, but it's to protect yourself. You've got to stay sane, and the only way to do that is to protect yourself from whatever. If you need a minute, take a minute. Those are boundaries, little ones. I think moms, women in general, but moms, I think are, in a general sense, maybe are more giving and open. We don't know how to do that, the boundaries.
Yeah, and I know one of the notes I wrote down is for boundaries, it's not to shut people out, but to, like what you said, but to shield ourselves from the consequences of their hurtful behaviors affecting us more than them. And I don't even feel like it's always hurtful behaviors. That's something you and I talked about is, like you said, the revolving door and just always keeping yourself open. And then my biggest thing is I've had to learn the power of no.
Yes.
And because of when you think you are available, you want to help people,
right?
And that's we've talked about that as women. We're nurturing beings. We want to be helpful, and if we feel like we can make it happen, then we want to do it. And so lately, I know that's a conversation you and I have had a lot. Is I've had to learn how to tell people no and how to tell them in the right way.
Right.
So it's not always hurtful behaviors. Right. Sometimes it's just learning how to, like you said, protect yourself and make sure you're valuing yourself and your time, which we did talk about some last episode
and not
as well.
Feel bad about it.
Right. That's the big,
you can't feel bad about it. You've got to have your, yeah.
Yeah, and I know some of the stuff she was talking about with boundaries in the book, with hurtful situations, very similar to the rain. So when it comes to forgiveness and setting boundaries with that, one of the analogies she used was if you are a parent of a child who has gotten addicted to a substance and you're trying to help them and trying to help them and trying to help them, who keeps getting hurt in that situation?
Right.
You do, because you're the one trying to help them. They're not going to help themselves unless they're ready, they're in the mindset and they're willing and ready.
Yep.
And so sometimes you have to set those boundaries to protect yourself from the hurt, because they're ultimately unaware.
The hurt and the frustration, though, right?
Yeah.
Because why are you not listening to me? Yes. I'm telling you how to do it.
Yeah, and it's like the rain. It doesn't matter what you say to them.
Yeah.
That is a situation that we want, as humans, we want to control it. We want to have that. But it's just like the rain. We cannot.
That's right.
You cannot change somebody. And that was something she mentioned over and over again. Is ultimately, we cannot change somebody. Right. The only person we can change is ourselves. That's it. We can only focus on ourselves and then just hope that, which we've talked a lot about perspective, but change your perspective, change your mindset, and then that will change everything around you. Yeah.
It does. 100% it does. I see life way different today than I did before. And I mean, even a year ago. It's an ongoing process.
Favorite quotes that I used to use as a teacher, and she said it in the book, and then I was like, oh my gosh, that used to be my catchphrase is hurt people.
Yeah.
And so or hurt, and even hurting people hurt people, whether it's intentional or not. And so that's where it's we do need to protect ourselves. We do need to which I know some people are like, oh, well, that's selfish. But it's I'm important too, and if you're focusing on yourself and what you're doing, it's okay to try and help people. It's just where you have to understand if somebody is not in a great place and they are hurting you over and over and over again.
Sucking you in.
Yeah, they are hurt. And all you can really do is don't get wrapped up in just trying to change.
You're allowed to love people from a distance.
Yes.
And people don't feel that way. I've talked to more people than not. It's well, you got to get along. Your family, right? Yeah, we maybe, but I don't got to be all up in you. You know, at your house. It doesn't have to be that way. It's okay to not. You deserve peace too, and if that's not it, then you need to put up that boundary.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the things that she wrote, that she actually had written in her journal, she shared in the book, is said, when I share biblical discernment with someone I love very much, but then they go out of their way to do the opposite, it's maddening. So my bottled up wisdom in the midst of your chaos produces extreme anxiety.
Yes.
So my resulting reaction is not being dramatic or overly emotional. I'm simply trying to save your life.
Yep.
And so I feel like that's where we get frustrated sometimes, is it's like you get wrapped up in a situation, especially when it comes to forgiveness situations.
Right.
Because where forgiveness takes place is somewhere where hurt happened.
Right.
Somewhere where some situation has happened that you feel personally hurt. And so, like, I can understand what she's talking about when some people may think you're being dramatic or emotional or why are you acting that way? And it's like, I'm just trying to help. I'm just trying to save this situation. And, you know, because like my recent situation that I was in, like, that's kind of how I felt, is it was like, I'm just trying to help. Like, I don't understand.
Right.
And so you start to get frustrated. But then, you know, as soon as you start putting those boundaries up and you start feeling a bit of protection.
Yep.
And so.
Yep.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, you got to have, I think we have to be okay with saying no. I mean, we're different in age. My generation, like, you didn't talk back. You didn't say no. You just did it.
And you don't ask questions.
And you don't ask questions. You know, I find, and like my youngest, every time she'd say something, it was why. Well, I don't know. Like, what? But I remember being aggravated. Like, you're not allowed to ask me that. That's in the rules somewhere. I saw it.
It is in the parent handbook.
You know, I mean, somebody, you know, but no. And so the older I get, the more I say, well, why?
Yeah.
Why is it? But do you know, people get aggravated. They don't want to. Nobody wants you to ask them why.
Well, why is a hard question to answer.
Right?
Yeah. So, like, even, you know, when I taught elementary school, and when you're starting off, you're supposed to ask, like, who, what, when, where. But why is the last question you teach, because it's such abstract thinking.
Oh.
And so I'm like, as adults, I think, you know, if you really think about that, why is pretty deep. You know, like,
it is.
When you have to think about the reason or the why. And so I think people get frustrated because it causes you to think. It's like, why? Why am I?
And I wonder,
doing
is it because you've got to now stop what you're doing to think? Like, because we've talked too about being so busy all the time. Nobody has time to stop for anything.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. I remember that, because it's like, you can ask somebody a simple question like, where is that at? Oh, I can tell you. Wait, like, those are very simple questions.
Yeah.
But then when you ask somebody that why, it's like when you ask a toddler or a 4-year-old and you ask them why, they're kind of like,
what?
What do you mean why?
You're right.
They can't.
You're right.
That is a really deep abstract thought.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think about that with adults, is when the question why stumps them.
Yeah.
It's because it's not easy to answer.
That's right. You're right.
Yeah.
I never thought of it like that. Yeah. Huh.
Food for thought.
Huh. Maybe we were smarter than them other folks, and they didn't really know why. And they sure did want to say, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because they knew everything.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I'm trying to, you know, teach my children is, like, if I really don't know, I'm very quick to say, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Or like, I don't know. I don't really know the answer to that question. Let me think about it, or let me find out for you.
Right. Yes.
Because like, I'm not going to make up something.
No.
And especially like with my kids, I like them asking me why. And so, yeah, it's very different than when I grew up too. Because I just remembered that.
Yeah.
Because I said so.
Right. Yes. And okay, we're just supposed to go with that, right? No, and Ansley, you know, we carry on conversations like you and I do. It's crazy. But she'll say, well, why? Well, I don't dare just make something up.
Yeah.
I know better with that kid. Like my others, I was always making something up, you know. But I don't dare do that with her because she's too smart for that. Like she'll go find the dictionary. I can see it, you know. It's like, no,
or she'll bring it up like months later. She'll be like, "Do you remember that one time that you told me?" Because that's what my kids do.
I'm gonna tell.
And I'm like, "How do you remember that?"
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, sorry. We could talk all day about these crazy kids.
They are crazy. But it's fun though. But it makes you realize, like, for me anyway, being able to watch her and like focus on that and see all the Well, how do you say that word?
I know what you're trying to say.
It's all very intricate.
Intricate, yes. If I was trying to say the other word, I struggle. My speech sometimes.
I don't even know. I know I can hear it.
Yes.
But I can't say it. But you know,
Go ahead,
you know
keep
what I'm
trying.
saying.
We'll listen to you keep trying.
Oh Lord, no, boy, we'll be here all day. That's funny. Yeah.
Well, I know one of the verses I had written down that she mentions in the book is Romans 12:9-21, which I'm not going to read all of it because it's a pretty lengthy. But you know, in my Bible it says Christian ethics. So I feel like this is very relevant to all of this. But kind of towards the end, it says, "Bless those who persecute you," which we've heard before. I feel like it's a pretty common bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. Yeah. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud. Instead, associate with the humble. Do not be wise in your own estimation. And then it says, do not repay anyone evil for evil, which I feel like one of the things she talks about is resentment, which we're going to talk about that in another episode. But, you know, don't repay evil for evil. And part of forgiveness is getting over that to where you're not wanting to retaliate towards somebody. Yes. And then, like at the very end in verse 21, it says, do not be conquered by evil, but conquer evil with good. Yes. And I know, like, I've heard people say before, like, well, it's easier said than done. And it's like, well, I have found
to a degree,
it is a pretty hard thing to do. Like, it's easier to just be around, like how we've talked about, like, just be a good human. Yeah. And it's easy to say. Yes. But then I feel like, well, I mean, you and I have talked about, like, one of the notes I made on here was talk it out with somebody. Yeah. And I have found lately, like, when you and I talk stuff out, it is making it easier to apply and carry out in my life. Right. Than if I was just sitting, like, I mean, I read every morning. I read all kinds of stuff. And if I'm sitting and thinking in my head, that is just not how I work. Right. Now, I know, like, I know plenty of people in my life who they are absorbers and they can just read and take in and then they can put out. But that's just not how I'm a very extroverted. Yeah. Extroverted, external person. Yeah. And so I have to talk it out because it makes me like, read, hear, let's talk it. I'm like, oh, now I can apply it. Yes. And so I honestly find myself being a better human. Like when we talked about let's be a better human, what does that mean? What are some action steps you could do to actually follow through with that? And then next thing I know, I'm like doing it without even thinking about it. Does that make sense? Yes. Like for me, that goes in line with the 2 eyes are better than one. You know, 2 pair of eyes are better than one. Check my work kind of for me. Like when you hear something out loud, it sounds a whole lot different than it does in your head. Yes. So like you got to get it out of your head and either out or on paper or something. And yeah, when you're mulling it over with somebody, it's easier, I think. I do too. You know. And again, that's just like, for me, that's how I learn easiest as well. I mean, that's why when I was a teacher, I was like talking it out or doing something with my hands to kind of reinforce it. Right. But see, like, I also feel like doing something with your hands and talking it out are both physical actions that are going to help, you know, reinforce a behavior or teach it. But that's just how I learned. Yeah. I do know some people that they can read a whole book and they're like, oh, I learned this. And I'm like, okay, I have to read and process and. Yeah, I'm a visual learner. And I guess that's what it is the visual piece of it. Yeah. And then when you hear somebody else's, however they handled something or their view on something, it makes it a different, you know, a different path maybe to look at things. Yes. It makes it easier to comprehend them. For me. Yeah, for me too. But I feel like we think, you and I feel like we're very similar in that sense. But so like that's where I kind of go back where I've said it in multiple episodes before. It's like you got to find your person. Yes. And then like I've been thinking about that a lot lately too because she was even talking about, you know, talking it out with somebody. But I really believe it makes a difference when it's not a family member or like your spouse, or I'm not saying you can't talk to them, but like find somebody who is not connected to the stuff in your life that you can just sit down and it's just like judge free, just talk. Yes. Now that is hard because it wasn't till honestly you and I could sit down that I had that.
Right.
And
Okay.
that I have friends. I have friends that I love to death.
Yeah.
But there's always just been something holding me back because I don't want honestly, I don't want people to think poorly of me.
Right. Yep.
And so then there's just kind of that roadblock of
I can't say everything.
yeah. But then, I do believe that everybody can find, because I found you, and I truly believe I can say anything in front of you, and you're just like, okay, well, let's talk about this.
I'm here, and it's important. It's very important. It took me almost a lifetime as well to find anybody that I felt that way with.
But when you do, it's
when you
life-changing.
do, it is. Yeah, it is. And
I also feel like you'll know.
Oh, yeah.
I don't feel like it's something that has to be forced, but if you are working on yourself and then how we've talked about shifting your mindset and then ultimately things around you will change.
Yes.
So then whenever you're meeting new friends and you're creating new friendships, I feel like it's going to happen organically where you're going to meet somebody and you're just going to be like, that's my person. Yeah.
And that's exactly right. That's exactly how that works. Oddly enough, I mean, because we've known each other for years, but not really known each other, for whatever reason. Life is busy, but we, and that's what makes it so much more strange that you feel as comfortable, you know, and maybe it's because you do know me and, I keep to myself, you can tell about people how they're going to handle your stuff for you. You know what I mean? But one of the verses that she also talked about, because people find it very hard to forgive because, they're letting you off the hook or whatever. 32:4, yeah. He is the rock. His deeds are perfect. Everything he does is just and fair. He is a faithful God who does no wrong. How just and upright he is. He will handle it. And here's what changed for me to be able to let it go, for him to handle it. I didn't realize that until you let it go for him to handle it, he won't. He'll let you.
Yeah. You got to have faith.
And you're not gonna. But you have to give it to, if you don't say, here, this is yours, you do it, you deal with what has happened, he won't do it. You've got to, and you should, because he will make it right. You may not see it, but he'll do it. Every time.
When I was still very, very bitter and hurt with my most recent situation, I wanted to see justice.
And that's the thing. That's why he doesn't let us see it.
Yeah.
It just hit me. That's why, because we're not supposed to want the vengeance.
See, and
even
that's what I
though
was
we
wanting.
do, even after we give it, sometimes we do want to see it.
Yeah.
We want to know, Daddy, how are you going to handle this?
Yeah.
Did you see what he did?
And you
Or
get in a
she
mind,
did?
and then you get in a mindset it's like, I want to see them crash and burn.
Yeah,
like you want to,
yeah.
But then,
that's why he sometimes doesn't let us. Because
and then just doing this, and I know I've told you talking all this out, I do feel like a new person. I feel like a whole weight has been lifted off me, and then I've gotten to the mindset like, I ultimately don't care. Like I don't care what's going on in that situation.
You're too busy fixing you.
Well, and because
changing
I'm like,
your life and doing your thing.
and it's ultimately, it's not even up to me. I have done what I felt like I needed to for that situation. I'm worried about me, my family, and what's going on with us.
Sister. Woo!
God's going to take care of the rest.
Preach it.
And it's funny when you talk about it, you're like, there's no way I could ever think that way. But I promise you, like, you can.
You can.
When you really do give it over and you're just like, okay, God, this is up to you. I'm giving it all over. And then it's like, no, I really don't think about it.
At all. It's nice.
Yeah.
And you just a short while ago, you were like, it's never going to happen. I'm never going to feel better.
I really thought it was going to take me a really long time to get over that. I really did, because of how much, I mean,
it was deep.
Yeah, you saw how much I was hurting, and I know I talked about it some on here, but really reading and talking and talking and when you're surrounding yourself with it so much, I really ultimately had no option. Like my mind was just so shifted in all of this that I mean, I can tell you from personal experience, it works.
It
like
does.
setting the boundaries
Yes.
and, going through the forgiveness. And part of the boundaries, especially for me, because I know like she talks a lot about her situation specifically in the book was infidelity, right? Like it was something with, her marriage, and she really thought it was something she was never going to get over. And then she talks about situations like drug addiction and things like that. But it was like, my situation was completely different. I'm not reading about it in a book, but ultimately it's applied to everything.
Yes,
it's like it's the exact same thing. So I have set up boundaries, and that's not saying I'm cutting people out of my life, because I'm not.
Yeah, no.
I still have many relationships with, and it's just like I'm not. Yeah, the boundaries for me are conversational.
Yeah,
and which I. In today's world of social media, I've done a lot of boundaries with social media.
Yeah.
So you just have to figure out your life, boundaries do work.
Yes.
They do help you clear your mind and take just an ease off of your shoulder of, this is for me. I'm protecting myself. And so like I said, for me, my boundaries were different. Specifically for forgiveness. I know we've talked about boundaries in other ways, but for the forgiveness aspect, I have set boundaries, and I'm not going to say that there aren't times that I struggle, because I want to kind of break those boundaries. I'm like, oh, I really just want to look and see. But the 2 or 3 times that I have done that, because I am human. And the few times that I've done it, it puts me in like a pit.
It does. It makes you in a
I'm
second.
like, why did I just do that?
Why do you do that to yourself?
And it puts me, it makes me sad. And I'm like, no. I'm like, put those boundaries back up. And so, it's not night and day. It's not super like cut dry.
No.
These boundaries are here. I'm never going to have issues with it again. She even talks about that.
Yeah.
She set boundaries up, and she still struggled with them. So I am struggling. But I definitely can tell a difference putting those boundaries up for myself.
Right. Well, the initial process, you know what to do first, and it kind of makes it a little bit easier that way. But the boundary, like I put them up, take them down, put them up, take them down, put them up, take them down. It's like, no, you got to put them up and leave them. Maybe they're going up too high. I don't know, but maybe, adjust them, but they've got to be there. They have to be there.
I agree.
Because you're not going to be peace of mind until you get there, but I think if you can remember that it's not about them so much as it is about you and your peace and your time and your consumption of whatever, it makes it easier to say yes to you versus no to something else, right? And maybe look at it that way. And I'm going to do the same, because that just came to me.
Yeah, no, I understand.
I'm going to work on that too, because I forget that part.
Yeah. My prayer for like everybody watching this too is, if this is something you're going through or you struggle with boundaries of any kind, whether it's just your day-to-day life, using the word no, which I've heard Priscilla Shirer, I don't know if you know who that is, but she talks a lot about, setting boundaries. And so just setting normal boundaries or setting boundaries that are going to help you move forward with forgiveness. I pray anybody watching this hears this and is able to reflect on their own life and be like, am I setting boundaries, or I am setting boundaries and this is what I'm doing? So I feel like this is important for any stage of life, for sure.
Yeah.
And
if you do have good boundaries, we're willing to listen and take some tips, because we struggle with the boundaries thing, let me tell you.
Yes. What is something that helps you set clear boundaries, but also if it's like if it doesn't have to do with forgiveness and it's just daily boundaries, how do you do it and still come off as loving and caring to those around you?
Where's the balance? How do you do your balance?
How do you tell people no and people not get so mad at you?
Right. What is your etiquette exactly?
Yes.
We would like to know.
Please share.
Because we're not good at that.
We're working on it.
We're working on it. We're not good.
No is just a really harsh word.
Well, I don't like to be told no. So I don't want to have to say it either.
Austin would tell you that he hates telling me no because
I pout.
I may or may not turn into a brat.
I know, Jesse will say no, and I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah.
What was
Excuse-
that?
That happened
Are
earlier.
you? Was that? I know, and I was like, "That's so funny," because I do that.
I'm like, I know you didn't just tell me no.
I can't. No.
Anyways.
No.
Yeah. Anyways. Well, thank
yeah, help
y'all.
us,
Yeah. Thank
please.
y'all so much for listening to this episode. And then our next episode, we're actually going to continue with this conversation, talk about resentment.
Yes.
But really hope you enjoyed today's episode, and we will see you next time on episode
Bye.
7. Bye.